Hi there, my name's Tom Kerss. I'm an astronomer and I'm an author, and in particular I'm the author of both the Children's Picture Atlas of the Stars and also of the Children's Guide to the Night Sky. Now this book contains no fewer than 100 things that you can challenge yourself to see in space, from stars and star patterns, constellations, to clusters and nebulae and other galaxies, to objects in our own solar system like planets, things to see on the moon, or even special events that come and go throughout the year. If you can find them all, take it from me, you really will have mastered the night sky. Now, to celebrate Collins Astronomy Week, I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that you can see in the sky in the autumn time. Try to give you some inspiration for things that you can look for as the nights continue to get darker. This time of year is a brilliant time of year for stargazing because we get long hours of darkness and there are some amazing things to find in the sky. So join me as we look at the autumn sky and let's see what we can find. Now, as the sun goes down and the stars come out, we are greeted with a variety of beautiful constellations on autumn nights. So let's take a look at some of the constellations that we see above our head. Now perhaps you recognize some of these patterns, maybe they're all new to you, but you've probably heard of some of these names. I suspect you've probably heard, for example, of Andromeda, maybe of Pisces, Aries and Aquarius, and perhaps the flying horse Pegasus, which is really the center of our autumn scene. Now we can also see some of the southwest on the right side of the chart and some of the southeast on the left side of the chart. And one of the difficulties with making star charts is that we have to take something which is really a dome above our heads and project it onto a flat picture so it fits on the page in a book like this one. But how would you actually know which way that you were facing? Well, when you go outside, there's a very easy way to find your way at night, and that is to use a familiar pattern of stars, what stargazers call an asterism, which goes by the name the plough. Now on autumn nights, the plough is usually lower in the northern part of the sky and it sits upright, taking the shape of a spoon. So if you go out and find the plough, there are two stars in there that we call the pointers. And if you trace a line between the pointer stars and then continue that line up into the sky, the pointers will reliably point the way to a very important star, which stargazers call Polaris. But it's perhaps better known simply as the Pole Star or the North Star. And one of the things that makes Polaris so special is that this star stays in the same position all night long. So if we speed up time and the sky seems to turn overhead as the Earth turns in space, Polaris is the one star whose position doesn't change. That's because Polaris is right above the Earth's North Pole. So when you've got Polaris in view and you're looking directly at Polaris, you are looking true north at that moment. And if you follow that line down from Polaris to the horizon, that is the way to the North Pole. So you can put Polaris behind you and then you know that you're facing south. And it's in the south where most of the interesting things in the sky actually appear to us. Now firstly, if you look over to the southwest, you can see what appears to be a kind of river of light in the sky. And this is what we call the Milky Way. There are three bright stars still with us, which are hallmarks of the summer because they form an asterism that we call the summer triangle. They are Deneb, Vega, and Altair, and they all belong to different constellations. The summer triangle asterism is a great signpost in the summer stars. It stays with us in the west in the autumn after sunset, and if we look into the summer triangle, we can see what appears to be a particularly bright part of the Milky Way. Sometimes we call this the Cygnus star clouds. So what are we actually looking at here? Well, we're inside the Milky Way. That's something astronomers understand today. So all of the stars that we see in the sky belong to the Milky Way, and the Milky Way itself forms this ring of light around us. To understand it a little better, let's take a look at our galaxy from the outside. Now, nobody actually knows what our galaxy looks like exactly from the outside, but we do have a pretty good impression of what it must be like. Astronomers have figured out that our star, the Sun, is about halfway out from the center and about halfway in from the edge. So let's take a closer look. We are in a broken off piece of a spiral arm, which astronomers call a spur. And when we look in one particular direction, we can look directly towards the center of the Milky Way. That's something we see in the summertime low in the south. But even here in the autumn time, we can look towards the summer triangle. And when we look at the summer triangle, we are looking along the spiral arm that we live in. So in this direction, we see a particularly bright impression of the Milky Way as we look through many more stars. Now we understand what the Milky Way is today thanks to astronomers. William Herschel, an English astronomer, was one of the first people to come up with what we consider to be our modern picture of the Milky Way, which is a big disk of stars in the universe. But William Herschel was not the earliest astronomer. The first person to use a telescope to look at the sky, as far as we know, was another Englishman by the name of Thomas Harriot. And in 1609, Harriot used his telescope from South London to look at the moon, and he made all manner of drawings in his first months of studying the sky. Harriot's moon drawings are beautiful and quite evocative, and the moon really is one of the easiest things to study with your own binoculars or telescope, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But telescopes have changed a lot since Harriot's time. The kinds of telescopes that I used would be unrecognizable to Thomas Harriot and other astronomers from 400 years ago. Fortunately, you can still get telescopes that aren't that dissimilar from those early models, and your own telescope might look something like the one that Harriot once used. You can take it out yourself into your garden at home or any dark space around you, and you can study the stars just like Harriot and other pioneers like Galileo once did. You can discover the sky yourself. But whether you're using your eyes, or a pair of binoculars, or a telescope, there's so many things to see, and I'm going to give you 5 examples of things that you can see in deep space. Some of these are visible just with your eye, so let's take a look. The autumn sky is just full of beautiful objects. I can't show you all of them, but I've put 5 of them together on one chart. And here I've picked a variety of objects, like the kind of variety that you find in the book. So these different colours represent different kinds of objects. We've got nebulae and star clusters and even a galaxy there. Now, one of the wonderful things about the sky, in my opinion, is that not only can you enjoy its great beauty, but we also understand what these things in the sky really are. So by studying these amazing things, you can also chart the stories of the stars, the life cycles of the stars, and get a better picture of the 3-dimensional nature of the universe above your head. Let's start by looking at a place where stars are born, and this is the North American Nebula, which you can find to the top left of the summer triangle. It's in the constellation Cygnus. The North American Nebula is a striking sight. With a pair of binoculars, you can just see it as a fuzzy patch of light, and with a telescope, it's much more clearly visible. Photographs show it red, and that's because it's made of gas, and the gas is glowing as it absorbs the energy of the young stars being born there. We're looking about 2,500 light years out into the galaxy to see this nebula. And you might at first glance wonder how it got its name, the North American Nebula. Well, I've turned the picture here to try and make it easier for you. We're not just talking about the country, the United States of America, we're talking about the whole continent of North America, so let's see how it fits. Not bad, in my opinion. Let's take a closer look then at the North American Nebula. It's close to the bright star Deneb that you can see on the right side of this picture. That's the brightest star in Cygnus the Swan and one of the stars of the summer triangle. So it's a very easy object to find. And as I said before, a pair of binoculars will show it to you. A telescope will make the shape even easier to see. You can also look to the right of the North American Nebula and try to challenge yourself by finding the nearby Pelican Nebula. And for that one, you will have to use probably a bit more imagination to see the shape. Now, when stars leave their nebulae behind, they blow away the gas and dust around them, and what remains often is a star cluster. And in the autumn time, as we head towards winter, we have the opportunity to see a very wintry object, which is rising in the east after sunset. This is the Pleiades star cluster. The Pleiades is sometimes known as the Seven Sisters, but there are many more than 7 stars in the cluster. In fact, there are as many as 1,000 stars making up this cluster. But the brightest members are visible just to the unaided eye, and they look really spectacular in binoculars. In fact, for my money, I think binoculars are the best way to see the Pleiades, because if you zoom in with a telescope, it can be quite hard to fit them all in your field of view. So take out your binoculars to enjoy these, and see if you can spot any wispy gas A couple of hundred years ago, it was easy to see the wispy gas around the Pleiades, but nowadays there's so much light pollution that it's difficult to see at all. It is, however, easy to capture on camera, and if you're interested in astrophotography, you'll find some tips and tricks in the Children's Guide to the Night Sky to help you get started. I would say the Pleiades is one of the best objects to look for when you start taking pictures of the sky. Now, not all clusters are found within our galaxy like the Pleiades. There are much more distant clusters as well, and their formation can be charted all the way back to the early history of the universe. Messier 15, or M15 for short, is one such example. This is about 35,000 light years away from us. It's not inside our galaxy at all. It floats free from it, buzzing around the Milky Way. This is called a globular cluster, and it's a really spectacular kind of cluster. Now, Messier 15 is home to perhaps 100,000 stars or more. No one knows exactly how many, but we do know that they form a giant spherical ball, and they are very distant and very ancient as well. We don't see any gas clouds remaining around these stars at all. But let's come back into our Milky Way and find an example of a star that has lived its life and died. Because just like people, stars are born, they live, and they die. And if we look into the constellation of Aquarius, it's possible to find a very strange kind of object, which astronomers call a planetary nebula. But don't mix this up. It's not a planet, that's just a name. This is a nebula, and we might better think of it as a sort of gravestone for a star that once was. In fact, this star was probably once rather like our star, the Sun, and it has since shrugged off its atmosphere into this extraordinary and beautiful cloud, which it is now lighting up as it continues to get smaller in the center of the nebula. So this planetary nebula is the remnant or remains of a star that was once like the Sun, and we might think that perhaps one day our star, the Sun, will look like this. But we can say that it won't look exactly this way because each of these planetary nebulae are as unique as a snowflake. And I think the helix is one of the most beautiful of all. So this is a great thing to go and look for with your telescope, particularly when you have a little bit more experience at finding those faint things in the sky. But if you have the opportunity to see it this autumn, try it. It's really fantastic, and you can see the helix shape quite clearly in your telescope once you zoom in. So finally, we come to a really distant object. In fact, if you live in a dark sky site, this is by far the most distant thing that you can see with just your eyes alone. It's not the Milky Way, it's not inside our galaxy, it's not even floating around our galaxy, it's a whole nother galaxy in its own right. This is the Andromeda Galaxy, and it is fully 2.5 million light years away. That's a long way. But this is our nearest galaxy, if you can believe it, and it is getting closer to us all the time. In fact, in billions of years to come, the Milky Way and the Andromeda Galaxy are going to collide with one another. I wouldn't worry about it. For now, it looks very serene in the sky, and we can take a look with our eyes, binoculars, or telescopes. Now, to the eye, the Andromeda Galaxy appears as a sort of faint smudge of light under very dark conditions. But with binoculars, it is unmistakable as an oval patch. With telescopes, and particularly medium or larger size telescopes, you can even see some of those dark features near the center of the galaxy. We call them dust lanes, and they appear dark to us in the picture here because they are seen in silhouette against the galaxy's bright core. But you can tell from the photograph that this is definitely a spiral-type galaxy like our own Milky Way, even if it is a little bit tilted edge-on as it approaches us. And if you look carefully, the Andromeda Galaxy actually has two bright satellite galaxies as well. These are dwarf galaxies which orbit around the Andromeda Galaxy, and each is quite impressive and substantial in its own right. So there's 5 things that you can go looking for in the autumn sky, and I hope you will take the opportunity with your eyes, binoculars, or telescopes to familiarize yourselves with the constellations this autumn as the skies get darker and the nights get longer. However, let's say that you live in the city. Let's say that the lights are always shining in your eyes and you don't have the opportunity to enjoy a dark and beautiful night sky. There are still plenty of things that you can see. For example, our wonderful celestial companion, the moon. You don't need dark skies to enjoy the moon, and with a pair of binoculars or a telescope, you can go hunting for all kinds of extraordinary features. In my guide to 100 things to see in space, I've allocated my top 10 sites to find on the moon, and the first of those is a crater called Copernicus, which is always facing us on the near side of the moon. Copernicus is not only an extraordinary sight, it also has an extraordinary namesake, Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer who was among the first to suggest that maybe the Earth isn't actually at the center of the universe, maybe the planets go around the sun. He was correct, of course, and he helped to propel us forward into a new age of science. So, aptly, he has a very large and impressive crater named after him. How large is it? Well, it's about 57 miles wide. I don't think the picture really does that justice, but to put it into perspective, the whole of London inside the M25 is only about half as wide as crater Copernicus. Let's take a closer look so we can see just how easily all of London would fit into this crater. And you can find this crater with just a pair of binoculars, and with a telescope it's really impressive. You can watch the shadows crawl across it as the moon makes its way around the Earth and the light changes on its surface as it turns. The moon also gives us special events to enjoy, like eclipses, such as lunar eclipses, which are perfectly safe and can be seen over large parts of the Earth's surface, and solar eclipses as well, which require care to observe properly. But the moon isn't the only object in our solar system that we can see in the night sky. There are also our neighbouring planets. Several of them appear as bright stars to our eyes, but with telescopes they really come to life. One of my favourites is the ringed planet Saturn, that some call the jewel of the solar system, and it's easy to see why. With even a small telescope, you can zoom in and see Saturn's rings for yourself. Rings which are made up of trillions and trillions of pieces of water ice, and they reflect the light of the sun back to us in the inner solar system, making them shine radiantly and giving Saturn its very appropriate reputation as one of the superstar sites in our solar system. And what about special events? Well, why not go out and observe a meteor shower? Autumn is a great time to do it because towards the end of October we have the Orionid meteors, and in mid-December we have the Geminid meteors, arguably the best and brightest meteor shower of the year. So there's going to be plenty of great opportunities to see bits of cosmic dust burning up in our atmosphere at hypersonic speeds and creating beautiful shooting stars in our sky. You can find out when to see those, as well as other special events and so much more, in the pages of the Children's Guide to the Night Sky. So whether you want to explore the constellations and point them out for your friends and family, learn more about the stars, discover objects in our solar system like the moon, the sun, planets, comets, asteroids, meteor showers, and more, or peer into deep space at the places where stars are born and where they die, or look across the cosmos towards other galaxies, it's all possible with the Children's Guide to the Night Sky. I hope this book gives you everything you need to start exploring the night sky yourself. Happy stargazing.